So 2025 has been the year where the financial world flipped on its head. If you've been watching what's happening in crypto, you already know this isn't just another cycle. This is a generational shift. We're talking about the kind of moves that don't just create millionaires, they create empires. And right now, the banks, the same banks that once laughed at crypto, mocked it, and tried to bury it, are now rushing to the front of the line, desperate to get a piece of the action. This is not financial advice. Let's start with what went down earlier this year. March 7th, the OC dropped a bombshell. They told banks straight up, "You are officially cleared to get involved with crypto activities." The red tape gone. That was massive on its own. But then May 7th rolled around and they doubled down, this time saying, "Not only can you touch crypto, you can handle custody and trading services too." Basically, they rolled out the red carpet for the entire US banking system to step into digital assets. And when we thought it couldn't get bigger, the FDIC came out with the same green light. Then the Fed followed suit. Same thing. All three of the most powerful banking regulators in America just gave the thumbs up. If you understand how huge this is, you know the whole game just changed. Instead of banks fighting crypto tooth and nail, they just got permission to sit down at the same table to play in the same sandbox. But here's where things get even crazier. Remember Operation Chokepoint 2.0? That coordinated attack that almost strangled crypto to death in the US. The one that made banks slam the door on any business that even touched digital assets. That was no accident. That was a full-on assault. And the company that had the biggest target on its back was Ripple. XRP was painted like the enemy. And yet here we are 4 years later with Ripple not just surviving, but going toe-to-toe with the biggest names in banking. And trust me, when you realize how much is on the line, you'll understand why this fight is happening. Now, before I go deeper, let me quickly point you to something that can completely change how you invest. Down in the pinned comment, I've left you access to the Ultimate Millionaire Investor Guide. Find 100x stocks. This isn't just a PDF. It's a complete package with documents, visuals, videos, and more, built to show you exactly how the biggest wealth builders in history find opportunities before they explode. If you're serious about turning small investments into generational wealth, this is the kind of information that separates the winners from the rest. Grab it in the pinned comment right now before you miss it. And don't forget, through my Robinhood link, you can grab free NVDA stock worth up to $200 with just a $1 deposit. Now back to Ripple. Even after all these new regulatory wins for the crypto industry, Ripple is still under attack. You'd think with the OC, FDIC, and FED all saying yes to crypto, things would finally calm down. Instead, Ripple is still getting hammered left and right. Why? Because Ripple is applying for a banking license. That's right. Ripple, the same company the SEC tried to drag through court for years, is going straight into the belly of the beast, applying to become a full-blown bank. This is a huge deal. They're not just fighting to exist in the US. They're going for dominance. They're aiming to redefine how money moves in this country and around the world. But of course, the pushback was immediate. Cody Carbone, CEO of the Digital Chamber, just put out a clip calling this out. He said, "Crypto companies are still being debanked, and it has to stop." He compared this to modern-day redlining. Back in the day, banks would deny services to people based on race or where they lived. Now, it's happening in politics and technology. If regulators don't like you, they just cut you off from the financial system. Gun companies, oil and gas, Trump businesses, crypto. One by one, they've been blacklisted. That's why Senator Scott's FIRM Act is so powerful. It eliminates reputational risk as an excuse for banks to block businesses. And the bill already has bipartisan support in the House. This isn't just noise, it's moving forward. But here's where things get wild. Even with the OC, FDIC, and Fed on board, 42 banks are actively trying to block Ripple's banking license. This isn't conspiracy. This is documented. The BPI, the Bank Policy Institute, just filed formal objections on behalf of those 42 banks. And these aren't your small-town credit unions. We're talking J.P. Morgan, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. Basically the cartel of big banks that have controlled money for decades. And they're terrified because what Ripple is building doesn't just compete, it eliminates their ability to profit off of you. Right now, the traditional system bleeds people dry. Every transfer, every overdraft, every delay. They charge you fees to move your own money. That's their entire model. But Ripple's tech flips that upside down. Instant payments, no ridiculous fees, global settlement in seconds. If Ripple gets that license, the entire playing field changes overnight. Now, it's not just the BPI. The ICBA, the Independent Community Bankers of America, representing over 5,000 banks, also filed objections. They're literally begging regulators to reject Ripple's trust bank charter. Why? Because Ripple's plan is too disruptive, too powerful, too transformative. Ripple wants to launch Ripple National Trust Bank, where they'll run custody services, blockchain payments, and manage reserves for their upcoming Ripple stablecoin, real low-value US dollar. The ICBA is arguing this goes way beyond what Congress intended for a trust bank charter, but the truth is, they're just terrified of how efficient and game-changing it is. Think about it. Ripple isn't even applying to take deposits. That's not allowed under this charter. They're focusing on blockchain payments and stablecoin reserves. But even that is enough to send shockwaves through the system. Why? Because if Ripple builds this, it undercuts the exact mechanism banks use to profit: slow settlement and high fees. And here's what's even crazier. These banks are openly saying Ripple's innovations are too disruptive. They're admitting in their own filings that Ripple's vision could completely reshape the financial system. That's not fear-mongering. That's confirmation. And that right there should get you excited. If the biggest banks in America are this desperate to stop Ripple, doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? Doesn't that scream that you're looking at the exact kind of technology that flips the world upside down? But here's what makes this even more interesting. While the BPI and ICBA are doing everything they can to block Ripple's trust bank charter, the reality is that the tide is shifting against them. The days when these banks could just quietly strangle innovation behind closed doors are ending. Too many eyes are on this now. Too many regulators, politicians, and even mainstream media outlets are starting to realize what's going on. And let's be honest, Ripple isn't the same company it was back in 2020 when the SEC launched its attack. Back then, they were still building, still fighting for credibility. Today, Ripple is an established global powerhouse with enterprise clients in every corner of the world. They've partnered with central banks, payment processors, and Fortune 500 companies. They've already proven their technology works. So, when Ripple applies for a national trust bank license, this isn't some startup swinging for the fences. This is a company that's already moving billions of dollars across borders, already securing deals with institutions outside the US, already building a stablecoin ecosystem that regulators actually want. And that's why the pushback is so fierce. These banks know they can't compete head-to-head with Ripple's efficiency. They can't offer instant settlement. They can't cut out the fees without destroying their own revenue streams. All they can do is slow Ripple down, lobby regulators, and hope the old system survives just a little bit longer. But that's a losing battle because the truth is, the world has already moved on. In Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, Ripple is embedding itself into financial systems at a speed that's impossible to ignore. Even if US banks succeed in slowing Ripple down domestically, the rest of the world isn't waiting around. And when the global standard is set, the US will have no choice but to follow. Think back to how the internet rolled out. At first, governments and companies tried to resist. They said it was a fad. They said it was too risky. They said it would never work. But once adoption hit critical mass overseas, suddenly everyone had to catch up. That's exactly what's happening with Ripple and XRP right now. And the irony is, the bank's own behavior is making the case for Ripple stronger. Every time they try to debank crypto companies, every time they file an objection, every time they lobby against innovation, they just prove how threatened they are. They're literally broadcasting to the world that Ripple is dangerous to their business model. Let's zoom in on what Ripple's actually building with this trust bank. Their stablecoin, RLUSD, is designed to be fully backed and transparent. Unlike other players in the stablecoin game, Ripple has the infrastructure and regulatory connections to do this right. That means large institutions, corporations, and even governments can actually trust Ripple's stablecoin as a foundation for real-world payments. Now imagine Ripple National Trust Bank running custody services for those assets. Imagine them managing reserves with transparency that puts traditional banks to shame. That's not just disruptive, that's revolutionary. That's the kind of move that forces everyone else to adapt. And let's not forget the timing here. Stablecoins are about to become one of the hottest sectors in all of finance. With the U.S. government signaling support for stablecoin legislation, demand is about to skyrocket. Corporations will need trusted partners to handle custody, payments, and compliance. Ripple is positioning itself to be that partner. Meanwhile, what are the banks offering? The same outdated system that failed in 2008. The same one that charges you $35 for an overdraft. The same one that takes 3 days to send money across borders. Do you really think that system survives when a faster, cheaper, and more transparent alternative is right there on the table? And here's the kicker. The very regulators that banks are leaning on to block Ripple are also the ones who just opened the door to crypto banking. The OC, the FDIC, and the Fed didn't make those announcements in March and May for nothing. They know where this is going. They know the future of finance is digital. They're not going to keep Ripple out forever. This is the clash of two eras. The old guard trying to cling to power versus the new system being built right in front of our eyes. And history shows us how this always plays out. The new system wins every single time. Just look at the bank's track record. They couldn't stop PayPal. They couldn't stop Venmo. They couldn't stop Square or Cash App. They couldn't stop Bitcoin. Every time they fight innovation, they lose. And Ripple isn't just another app or payment platform. Ripple is a foundational layer for the new Internet of Value. That's orders of magnitude bigger than anything we've seen before. Now, let's talk about the psychology of what's happening. When JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs lobbies against Ripple, they're not just making a financial calculation. They're acting out of fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of a world where they don't dictate the rules. Fear of becoming irrelevant. And fear when it's this strong is the biggest signal you can get that the disruption is real. Because let's be real, if Ripple wasn't a threat, they wouldn't care. They wouldn't waste money on lobbyists. They wouldn't mobilize organizations like the BPI and ICBA. They wouldn't push regulators to fight so hard. The fact that they're doing all of this tells you everything you need to know. And think about how poetic this is. For years, the narrative was that Ripple was too centralized, too corporate, too friendly with banks to ever be a true crypto project. Bitcoin maximalists mocked it. Critics said it could never win. And yet, here we are with Ripple so disruptive that the largest banks in the world are treating it as enemy number one. That flips the entire narrative on its head. Because if Ripple was truly harmless, if it was just another centralized project, the banks would welcome it. They'd try to co-opt it, not crush it. The fact that they're trying to bury it proves Ripple's tech is far more dangerous to their model than anyone wanted to admit. And here's the part nobody's talking about. Even if Ripple's Trust Bank application gets denied, the battle is already won. Why? Because the objections themselves are public record. We can see in black and white that these massive banking institutions are terrified of Ripple. That's proof you can't ignore. That's proof that the disruption is real. At the same time, Ripple's global expansion continues. deals with financial hubs in Asia, partnerships with remittance companies in Africa, integration with European institutions. This isn't just a US story anymore. This is global. And once the global system is in place, the US banks won't be able to stop it. They'll be forced to join it. So really what we're witnessing isn't just another regulatory battle. It's the collapse of an old monopoly. It's the unraveling of a system that's been in place for over a century, and it's happening right now in real time with Ripple at the center of it all. And if you zoom out even further, this makes perfect sense. Every major shift in history has looked just like this. The printing press, the internet, smartphones. At first, the old powers fight it with everything they've got. They throw up roadblocks. They scream about risks. They try to legislate it out of existence. But then, when it becomes too powerful to stop, they scramble to adopt it. That's exactly where we are with Ripple and XRP today. The resistance is fierce. The attacks are non-stop, but the momentum is unstoppable. And the more the banks fight, the more obvious it becomes that this is the future. Nick Blackwood nailed it in a recent post. He said they want Ripple banned. That means you're right over the target. That's the truth. When your competition spends millions trying to bury you, it's because they can't beat you. And Ripple isn't stopping. Their entire plan is to redefine how money moves in a digital economy. And if they succeed, the bank's entire empire comes crashing down. Now think about what that means for investors. The banks are signaling exactly where the pressure point is. They're not spending all this energy trying to shut down random altcoins. They're focused on Ripple. They're focused on XRP. They're focused on the XRPPL ecosystem because they know it's a direct hit to their bottom line. Ripple flips that. Instead of 3-day settlements, you get near instant settlement. Instead of sky-high remittance fees, you get pennies. Instead of opaque systems where you never really know where your money is at any given moment, you get transparency on a blockchain ledger. That's the real threat, not to us, to them. And the longer this plays out, the clearer it becomes. Even if Ripple faces roadblocks in the US, the global stage is wide open. Other countries don't carry the same baggage. They don't have massive banking lobbies spending billions to maintain control. They're far more willing to adopt technology that actually works. That's why we've already seen Ripple make such huge moves abroad. Let's take it back to 2008 for a second. The global financial crisis wasn't just a wake-up call. It was a glaring spotlight on how broken the system is. Banks played games with people's money. They gambled with other people's savings. And when it all collapsed, they got bailed out. Regular people, they lost homes, jobs, retirement accounts. And the lesson for the banks was clear. No matter how reckless they are, they get saved. Now, fast forward to today. That same group of institutions is terrified of Ripple. And isn't that poetic? The ones who caused the last crisis are now panicked about losing control of the system altogether. If there was ever a time for a major disruption, it's right now. And make no mistake, disruption always looks chaotic at first. But history doesn't remember the resistance. History remembers the breakthrough, and Ripple is sitting at the exact point where all the energy, all the pressure, and all the resistance converge. That's not a bad sign. That's the best signal you could ask for. Because when banks try this hard to shut something down, you know you've struck gold. You know the innovation is too powerful to ignore. And that's why Ripple's banking license fight matters so much. Whether they win or not, the fact that the opposition is this strong proves the technology is world-changing. Even the critics can't escape that truth. Think about the Bitcoin maximalists who have spent years mocking XRP. They said it would never succeed. They said it would never challenge Bitcoin. But here's the reality. The biggest financial institutions on the planet aren't spending money fighting Bitcoin. They're fighting Ripple. They're fighting XRP. They're fighting the XRP PPL ecosystem. And that says everything you need to know. When you zoom out, you see the pattern. First, they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and finally, you win. Ripple has passed the first 3 stages. The fight is on, and that means the win is closer than anyone wants to admit. And here's where it gets really exciting. Imagine what happens if Ripple does secure that banking license. Imagine Ripple National Trust Bank running custody for digital assets, managing reserves for RLUSD, and powering global payments on-chain. That's not just another bank. That's a whole new financial infrastructure being built right inside the US system. Once that happens, adoption explodes. And once adoption explodes, demand for XRP skyrockets. That's the setup we're looking at right now. Pressure from every angle, resistance at every level, but momentum that can't be stopped. And when the dust settles, Ripple isn't just another crypto company. They're a cornerstone of the new financial era. So ask yourself, why would the biggest banks in the world spend this much time and money trying to block Ripple if it wasn't a real threat? Why would they mobilize organizations representing over 5,000 banks if it didn't matter? Why would they risk drawing attention to Ripple if they weren't desperate to slow it down? The answer is simple. Because Ripple is the real deal, and deep down, they know it. And if they know it, shouldn't you? That's why right now is the moment to pay attention, to lean in, to get serious about understanding how these shifts create opportunities. Because when this kind of tectonic change hits the financial system, it doesn't just make waves, it makes fortunes. Which brings me to this. If you're serious about positioning yourself for what comes next, make sure you check out the Ultimate Millionaire Investor Guide. Find 100x stocks in the pinned comment below. It's loaded with strategies, documents, visuals, and videos to help you spot the exact kind of opportunities that turn small investments into life-changing wealth. And don't forget, through my Robinhood link, you can grab free NVDA stock worth up to $200 with just a $1 deposit. NVIDIA is one of the biggest AI leaders in the world, and this is a chance to get exposure without spending extra. Both links are waiting for you in the pinned comment. This is the turning point. Ripple's fight with the banks isn't a sign of weakness. It's proof of strength. And the more they resist, the more obvious it becomes.